this video, I want to talk about whether or not scrims or sweats are really worth your time, whatever the reason may be. Most times you see scrims nowadays, it's usually someone streaming it for the sake of stream content. There are decent money prize pool tournaments from time to time, but it's generally a waste of time as your chances of getting top 3 are very slim, since the best players in the game will likely partake in it. If there's like a 3 or a 4K tourney, you might as well play in it if you think you are good enough to luck out into the top 3. You never know, man. You could at least luck out into top 3 and get some cash. But if you don't even make top 3, you basically just wasted time scrimming for 2 or 3 hours a day, and you basically wasted, 9 to 10 hours of the tournament day to not get top 3. But let's say, maybe you are not in it for the monetary gain, which is very little to begin with unless you consistently win or place top 3. But rather, you want to test your game and skill sets against like-minded players in an environment that eliminates all the annoying cheese or outliers in a sandbox, right? Now, let me get this out of the way right now. I in no way think that this game is remotely competitive. As Drew would classify it, Destiny 2 is the Mario Kart of FPS games. If you have ever played any Mario Kart game, you know exactly what I am talking about. This, however, doesn't mean you can't improve in said game or Mario Kart, but don't expect your skill in game sense alone to win you all your races, or in D2, in this case, games. Now that this is out of the way, let's talk about what scrimmages are, and I'm not talking about the line of scrimmage in football. Scrims, first of all, are generally a misnomer in this game, the way most people use it. Usually if someone mentions scrims, it's likely just pickup sweats. Scrimming is when two set teams play against another set team, or two set teams play against each other for the purpose of practice for some big tournament that's coming up or whatever. You see this often in games with an established esports scene, like Valorant, CSGO, Halo, Call of Duty, even though that game sucks dick. But I digress. Essentially, it's mostly just a series of pickup games with a handful of players with the rule set tied to it. Now, are customs really worth playing and getting into in D2? The obvious answer is no, because the game ain't built for high-level play. But for personal growth and the value of that growth, it could be worth it. Let's expand on that in a bit. In the grand scheme of things, scrims aren't worth committing to at all in this game. There just isn't enough money to be made, and even then, you could spend your time doing something else much more meaningful, right? That will probably make a difference in your life. So the obvious answer is no. But personal growth and the value of the growth, it could be worth it. So let's expand on that in a bit. Scrims as it is, or as it's always been in the history of Destiny, since it's a community-held thing, a very small minority of the PvP community manage the scrim side of the game, right? So there's obviously rules set in place by them, which are biased, right? And that's one side of the double-edged sword of scrims. That one side is that the rules are very restrictive of the sandbox, and players who have particular playstyles with certain weapons or classes, or have that niche identity with their classes, they may not be able to use that and show that off. So you're limited in ways in which you can express yourself as a player. But on the other side, you also get to play against players that are really good, and you get to test yourself, right? You get to play against people that shoot back, which is generally engaging and fun, right? But perhaps you may be on that side where, you hate playing against bows, you hate playing against grenade launchers, stasis, whatnot. All the cheesy outliers you can think of in a sandbox is pretty much banned, right? So perhaps you don't like playing against that, so you resort to scrims to play it, just to avoid, whatever the outliers are in a given sandbox in pubs or public matchmaking like trials, survival, or 6v6, right? Now, as far as improving goes, scrims are arguably the best for that because playing sweats in D2 will teach you things and teach you certain movement techs or just game sense in general that pubs and survival and trials will never ever teach you, right? Scrims will teach you how to play and listen at the same time, or speak and play. It's pretty difficult at first. It is a lot easier said than done. You're probably thinking, oh, that's pretty easy to do. You'd be surprised how hard it is to, when you really start thinking about it, how hard it is to play while thinking about multiple things, while communicating with your team, while digesting that information and acting accordingly, all at the same time. You'd be surprised how many people think that's easy, but it's actually very difficult to do it, and it takes a lot of mastery. Sweats will also teach you how to be more, I guess, how to move or carry purpose, if that makes sense. I don't know how to explain it, to be honest. Basically, to just have a general sense of urgency, right? A lot of the time, you'll see players, like Pure, for example, like Pure Chill, he says, I see it all the time. Whenever he's playing Trials and it's like a sweaty game or something, he's usually calling out saying this guy's one shot when he hasn't even started firing at the guy yet. You see it a lot in FPS games as well, especially in Halo. You start firing, like in pro play, a player will start firing at someone in, let's say, top mid or something, and then it'll just be like top mid weak already, or, you know, Pure would be like, this guy that I'm firing at is weak. Even though he's not weak, it's stimulating some sort of sense of urgency to get his teammates to look at the angle that he's looking at, so it's a free kill, right? That way he's not fighting the 1v1. Because if you're just fighting a 1v1, you know, you're just taking a gamble at that point, especially in Destiny. So like I said, scrims will teach you sense of urgency. It'll teach you rotations. You'll get a lot more efficient at speaking and playing at the same time while digesting information and adjusting accordingly, right? It's all under the realm of game sense, to be honest. It takes a lot of time, but scrims will teach you all of that. In pubs, survival, trials simply will not, because let's be honest, you're not really facing tough opponents in those environments. While we're on the topic, how does one get into community customs? There are several content creators, just the name off the top of my head. Ascendant Nomad, Patty Cakes, Ill Physics, they all do their own community customs, right? I know Ill Physics does his community customs at 2 p.m. And basically the thing about community customs, the reason why I would suggest going there is because the environment is typically more friendly. You don't have to worry about people egoing you or being nasty to you, because let's be honest, Face It, it's a lot. Some environments like Face It, for example, it's a lot easier to get games, but your teammates are most likely going to be pretty nasty at you if you play bad or perform bad, right? Or make a play that they see as stupid. I'm guilty of this, so I need to be better in that regard, but I haven't played Face It in almost a year and a half because I've matched a blatant cheater and I have not touched it since. So, you definitely want to do community customs with content creators. Find out what their dates are that they set them up, and then just get involved, because they will give you constructive criticism as well as praise, right? So when you do make mistakes, they're probably gonna rail you about it, but in a constructive and nice manner that doesn't really feel demeaning to you, right? And they'll also give you praise for the good things you do, right? Reinforce the positive things that they do. Now, as I mentioned previously, community customs is probably the best route to go if you want a generally friendly environment that you can play against pretty competent players and like-minded players in. But if you can handle it, Face It is another option. My experience with Face It personally, it's not been the worst. I just find it boring because Face It is basically matchmaking for like sweats, right? There's like an elo system that you can climb or whatever. I forget how it works because I haven't played Face It in like over a year. But basically, there's this elo system that you can climb. You lose or gain points based on wins or losses. And that number or of elo that you gain does fluctuate depending on the level of your teammates. And generally, if you want to climb, if climbing is what you care about, then you're gonna have a pretty hard time doing so. Because if you want to climb, basically, you're gonna get the most elo for winning if you grab 2 low-level players, right? So generally, it becomes like this fest of just double carrying, and I don't know, it's pretty exhausting. What got me to stop playing Face It was honestly just, it felt like double carry simulator, and I also matched a blatant cheater in that, so it's just like, yeah, this is pointless. It was just something to stream at the time. I didn't really care about getting better or improving, but I just didn't want to play 6v6 at the time, and I felt like I needed something to stream, so that's where I went, right? So Face It, it can also kind of serve as a way to get your foot in the door in the sweat community, which is very small, right? It is very small, and I can't emphasize that or reiterate that enough. It is very small, so it's kind of hard to get known or get your name out there. And if you're gonna play Face It, especially, you don't want to perform bad because first impressions are kind of everything. If you play Face It on, like, you know, a streamer's team and they're streaming, they're gonna be like, everybody, the people watching will know to not pick you and put them, you know, and put you on their team, right? If they know you're just gonna perform bad. So Face It's not the most welcoming environment, but if you feel you're good enough and that you can handle the toxicity occasionally from time to time, it's a pretty decent option to get your foot in the door, right? Basically, you can kind of prove yourself and Face It. Not really. You can kind of prove yourself as a way, and then there's another level to that. There's a lot of really good players that do pickups amongst themselves, like tier 1 lobbies of just tier 1 or tier 2 players playing against each other, just doing pickups for fun. You could also get invited to those. But on the topics of doing scrims and getting a team, I don't really know what I could say to help you out, because the sweat scene is kind of dying down, and it's just been dragged on for a lot longer than I thought it would be, to be honest. So pretty much everyone's got their set teams. They have their circles of players that they're willing to play with, right? So don't expect to really get on any team unless you've proven to yourself and Face It that you can kind of play. People just play in them because of stream content sake. And the people who consistently play scrims, that play in these high level tourneys with a lot of money on the line, they generally win them, or they're at least placing top 3, so they're always getting something out of it, right? So for people who have a hard time finding teams, I honestly don't know. I have no suggestions or tips on how I can help you, aside from the fact that maybe some of these teams that you probably want to get on, or maybe people aren't scouting you out because you're probably not that great. It's kind of the same thing with trials, right? You know, I see a lot of, you know, in the nicest way possible, I see a lot of really bottom tier players. They think they deserve a spot on these decent teams, when in reality, it's like, you know, you're not as good as you think you are. You don't deserve a spot on this team. If you're, like I said, my personal feeling is that if you're good at the game, people will want to play with you. It's really that simple, right? Why am I gonna, you know, pick up a bad player on my team just to lose? If I had the intent of losing, I'm just gonna play with IRLs or play with some of my close friends that play D2. If we're gonna lose, at least we're gonna have a good time. I'm not gonna sit there with a stranger that I don't talk to or interact with just to lose, right? That'll just be awkward and kind of annoying. So let me know what you think of this. My thoughts were kind of all over the place with this one, not gonna lie. But do let me know what your comments are. Like I said, check out Ill Physics, Senate Nomad, Patty Cakes. I'm sure there's several other creators that have their own community customs as well, but those are the 3 that I can mainly think of. If you want to get into scrimming or doing sweats, I'd start there personally. Nowadays, it's just the sweat scene is not very welcoming, especially face it, and just, doing scrims against people you don't know, right? In an environment that isn't moderated by good people, you're probably not gonna have the greatest experience. So, biggest suggestion, start with content creators and their community customs. I promise you won't regret it. In the meantime, I'll see you guys around. Thanks for watching.